It was already too late to drive home, and as I pulled into a nearby hotel with my only son, I had no idea that this night would turn into one of the most emotional moments of my life. Little did I know my son was about to do something that would change everything. Stay with me, and I'll share how a simple moment turned into a lifetime memory. The day had been long, but it wasn't the kind of long that felt like it was dragging. It was the kind of long that left you feeling both exhausted and grateful. My son, Alexei, and I had just visited my mother in the countryside, a visit that had been filled with laughter, old family stories, and the warmth only home can give. But now, as we made our way back home, the tiredness began to settle in like a heavy blanket. It was past 9 p.m, and the road ahead seemed endless, stretching out far beyond the reach of our headlights. I glanced at Alexei, who was resting beside me in the passenger seat. His soft breathing filled the silence, a peaceful contrast to the hum of the car's engine. I could see the little creases of sleep forming on his face, the weight of the day catching up with him as well. I sighed and glanced at the GPS. The screen flickered, showing 4 more hours to go. 4 hours. I could already feel the tension in my shoulders tightening, the long stretch of highway ahead almost mocking me. The night was growing darker, and I knew that driving for hours more wasn't an option. The thought of pressing on through the night, barely able to keep my eyes open, made me shiver. I wanted rest, but not on the side of the road. We needed a place, a real place, to settle in for the night. Turning the steering wheel, I spotted a small hotel up ahead. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I glanced at Alexei, who was still half asleep, unaware of my decision. He didn't need to know. It wasn't about finding luxury. It was about finding peace for the night. I pulled into the parking lot, the wheels crunching against the gravel. The hotel looked modest enough, bathed in the soft glow of street lamps. I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. We were off the road, at least for now. The promise of a bed, even for just a few hours, felt like a luxury in itself. We walked into the hotel lobby where the desk clerk greeted us with a tired smile, and after a quick check-in, we made our way up to our room. The space was small, but it felt comforting in its simplicity. The hum of the air conditioner, the clean white linens, the soft lighting, everything felt like a breath of fresh air after hours on the road. Alexei stretched out on the bed, letting out a quiet yawn. His eyes fluttered closed almost immediately, but I stayed up for a moment longer, staring out the window at the night sky. The thought of how quickly the days had gone by hit me like a wave. Time, so fleeting, so precious. I couldn't remember the last time I'd truly rested. And yet, there was something else. Something in the quiet, the stillness that made me feel like something was about to shift in the air between us. The night had only just begun, but already I could sense a change. The room was small, just big enough for the two of us, with a single bed and a window that faced the quiet parking lot. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it felt like a haven. The worn carpet underfoot and the faint smell of cleaning supplies didn't matter. What mattered was that we had found a place to rest. Alexei kicked off his shoes and flopped onto the bed with a sigh. I could hear him settling in, adjusting the pillow and pulling the blanket over him. I smiled softly as I watched him, feeling a wave of gratitude. He had always been such an easy child to take care of. He never asked for much, always content with whatever I could provide. Even now, after everything, he never made a fuss, never complained. As he drifted off to sleep, I felt a momentary pang of guilt. My mind kept drifting back to the years of sacrifice, the times when I had to put my own needs aside to make sure Alexei had everything he needed. It wasn't always easy, and at times it had felt like I was running on empty. But now, in this small, quiet hotel room, the exhaustion was starting to weigh heavier than I realized. I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to keep myself awake, but my eyelids were growing heavier by the second. There was something about the stillness of the room that seemed to press against me, wrapping me in its quiet. I glanced at Alexei again, his face calm and peaceful. For a moment I almost envied his ability to fall asleep so easily. I wondered what his dreams were like, what thoughts filled his mind when the world went silent around him. Suddenly I felt the sharp pang of loneliness that had been creeping up on me for days. It wasn't the loneliness of being alone, Alexei was here after all, but the quiet, the feeling that I had been carrying so much for so long, without ever really sharing it. My eyes drifted to the small lamp beside the bed, and I realized that the weight of it all had been pressing down on me for longer than I had cared to admit. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and tried to shut my mind off, but the exhaustion was different tonight. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. The years of sleepless nights, the never-ending responsibilities, the worry that I might not be doing enough. As I lay there trying to find comfort in the silence, Alexei's voice suddenly cut through the stillness, soft and gentle. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I turned toward him, surprised to hear him awake, and saw him sitting up in the bed, his eyes wide and alert, as though he had something he needed to say. "Are you okay?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. He stared at me for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. I could see the earnestness in his eyes, and before I could say anything else, he spoke. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice so calm it caught me off guard. "I know you've been working really hard lately. I know you do a lot for me, for us." His words hung in the air, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. What was this about? I hadn't expected him to say anything, let alone something that felt so heavy. I sat up slowly, unsure of what was coming next. Alexei was still sitting on the edge of the bed, his small hands twisting the edge of his blanket. His face was serious, yet there was something soft about his expression, something vulnerable, like he was trying to gather the courage to say whatever was on his mind. "Mom," he said again, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I just wanted to tell you something that I've been meaning to say for a while now." I froze. There was something about the way he spoke, like his words were important, like they carried a weight that had been quietly building up. I could feel my heart begin to race, unsure of what he was about to share. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea what was coming, but something told me that this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. Alexei took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving mine. For a moment, the world outside the room seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us in that small space, the only sounds the hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of his blanket. "I know I don't always show it, but I see everything you do for me. I see how hard you work, how you're always there for me, even when you're tired or stressed or when things aren't easy." He paused, his brow furrowing as if he was trying to find the right words. "I just want you to know that I appreciate everything you do. I don't say it enough, but I notice it. And I'm so proud of you, Mum." The words hit me like a thunderclap. I felt a sudden rush of heat in my chest, a flood of emotions I hadn't expected to feel. I blinked, unsure how to process what he had just said. My eyes burned as I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. "You're proud of me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Alexei nodded, his eyes sincere, as if he knew exactly what those words meant. "Yeah, I know I don't always say it, but I'm proud of you for everything you do, for being strong when it feels like it's too much, for always being there when I need you." I sat there, completely stunned. I had always tried to be strong for him, to protect him from the struggles of life, to shield him from the things I thought he didn't need to know. I never realized that he could see all of it, that he could understand the sacrifices I had made. But there he was, my son, recognizing the things I never thought he noticed. And in that moment, it felt like the world shifted. All the stress, all the worries that I had carried for so long seemed to melt away. The weight of responsibility, of trying to be everything for him, was momentarily lifted, replaced by something even more powerful: validation, love, appreciation. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a deep, undeniable sense of connection between us. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to do it all on my own. He saw me. He understood me. And that was more than enough. Tears filled my eyes, and without thinking, I pulled him into my arms, holding him tighter than I ever had before. It wasn't just because I was his mother. It was because in that moment, he had become my anchor, my strength. "I love you, Alexei," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to say that. You don't have to thank me. Just having you with me is everything I could ever need." Alexei squeezed me back, his arms wrapping around me with the same quiet strength that I had always felt from him. We held each other in silence, both of us understanding something deep and unspoken. It wasn't about the things we did for each other. It was about being there, about showing up day after day, no matter what. We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other, letting the moment stretch out between us. There was a softness in the air now, a kind of warmth that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My mind raced as I absorbed everything Alexei had just shared with me. His words felt like a balm for a wound I hadn't even known was there. I had spent so many years focused on the next task, the next challenge, that I had never stopped to really understand how much Alexei was growing, how much he was seeing and understanding. As I pulled away, wiping the tears from my eyes, I looked at him, really looked at him. He was still the same boy I had watched grow up so quickly, but in that moment he felt different to me. He felt older, wiser. It wasn't just his body that was changing, but his heart, his soul. And it hit me like a wave. "I don't know what to say," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on everything I thought I was supposed to do. I've been trying to be strong for you, but sometimes I forget that you see everything, that you understand." Alexei smiled at me, his eyes soft and full of understanding. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to be perfect. You've always been enough. Just knowing you're there, it's everything to me." The simple truth of his words took my breath away. I had spent so much time trying to be the perfect mother, the one who had everything under control, the one who always knew exactly what to do. I had convinced myself that my love had to come with perfection, that I had to make no mistakes. But in that moment I realized how wrong I had been. What Alexei was telling me wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about being flawless. It was about showing up. It was about love, trust, and being real with each other. I let the realization sink in, and a soft laugh bubbled up from within me, a mix of relief and disbelief. "I think you just taught me something, kiddo." He grinned, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "I think you've taught me more than I could ever teach you." His voice was playful, but I could hear the weight behind the words, the sincerity in his tone. For a moment I didn't know what to say. The truth was, Alexei had been teaching me all along, in ways I hadn't even realized. He had been watching me, yes, but I had been watching him too. Watching him grow into someone who understood love in its purest form. Unconditional, unwavering, without expectations. He had been teaching me that it wasn't about what I did for him, but how I loved him, how I showed up day after day. That, to him, was enough. I reached out and cupped his face gently in my hands, looking into his eyes as if seeing him for the first time. "I'm so proud of you, Alexei," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "More than you'll ever know. You're growing into such a remarkable young man." And in that moment, I realized that he wasn't just growing in age, but in wisdom. His kindness, his empathy, his understanding, they were the true measure of the person he was becoming. We stayed there for a while longer, in that quiet, still room, holding on to each other. I felt like I could stay in that moment forever, like the world outside no longer mattered. Because in that moment, I understood something so deep and important. My love for him and his love for me was enough. It was more than enough. As the quiet of the night wrapped around us, time seemed to slow down. The weight of the day, of the long drive, of everything that had been weighing on me, felt like it had lifted. It was just Alexei and me in that small hotel room, a world away from the chaos and demands of life. And in that stillness, we both understood something without saying a word. It wasn't the room, the bed, or even the night itself that made this moment special. It was what had happened between us. The conversation, the honesty, the deep connection. I realized how much we had grown together, not just as mother and son, but as people who had learned to see each other, really see each other. Alexei turned to me, his face still serious, but with that same quiet strength I had always admired. I think we both needed this," he said softly, breaking the silence between us. "We needed to be here, in this moment." I nodded, unable to find the right words to express what I felt. It was more than just a night in a hotel room, it was a pivotal moment for both of us. A shift in how we saw ourselves, our relationship, and the world around us. In a way, it felt like we had crossed some invisible line, stepping into a new chapter of our lives. A chapter where we didn't have to pretend, didn't have to carry the weight of expectations. We could just be. "You're right," I finally whispered, my voice filled with emotion. "I've always tried to do everything on my own, but tonight I feel like we've both learned something, that we don't have to carry everything alone." He looked at me, his eyes filled with an understanding far beyond his years. "We never had to, Mom. We've always had each other. And that's what matters." I swallowed, fighting back the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. He was right. We had always had each other. Through every challenge, every late night, every difficult decision, we had made it through together. And that bond was unbreakable. "I'm so lucky to have you," I said, my voice trembling. "You're the best thing I've ever done, Alexei." He smiled, his eyes soft and full of love. "I'm lucky to have you too, Mom." We stayed up a little longer, just talking, sharing quiet thoughts and memories. It wasn't about anything in particular. It was about being in the moment, being present with each other. The worries of tomorrow, of the world outside, didn't matter. We had everything we needed right there. As the night deepened and the quiet of the hotel room embraced us, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The exhaustion, the constant pressure, it all seemed so small in comparison to the love and connection we had shared tonight. When the first light of dawn began to peek through the window, I knew it was time to leave. But I also knew that no matter where life took us next, we would carry this moment with us. We would carry the understanding that we didn't need to be perfect, that it was okay to let go of the weight of the world for just a while. And as we packed our things and headed out the door, I realized something important. It wasn't about where we were going or how we got there. It was about how we got there together. "Let's go home, Alexei," I said, my voice calm, steady, filled with a new sense of hope. "But wherever we go, we'll always have this." Alexei smiled up at me as we stepped out into the cool morning air, And I knew then that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. And that was all that really mattered.